Welcome, everyone. I see many of you are populating our Zoom webinar room. So thank you so much for being here this morning. This is day 2 of our Virtual Training Institute, and we are so excited to have you joining us today. Today we're going to be talking about digital literacy and the adult learner. And from our state office, we have Jamie Harris, who's going to be kicking us off today. So before we get started, I'd like to launch a poll, and I'd like to know what your role is within your program. So you're going to see this pop up on your screen, and you can use multiple options if that suits your needs. But let's just take a look and see who's with us today. Okay, very interesting. We have a fairly evenly divided group. Let me share these results so you can see them. So you can see that we are pretty evenly split between program administrators, instructional specialists, instructors, and four others. So thank you for being here. If you wouldn't mind, take a moment to type your name and your program in the chat box. If you have to change the setting. So where it says to, it probably is defaulting to all panelists. You can change that to all panelists and attendees. And if you do that, everyone will be able to see what you type. All right, welcome everyone. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Jamie, and she's going to talk to us for the next hour about digital literacy and the adult learner.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for being here. My hope is you're ready to participate, because I am not just going to talk for a whole hour. So our topic today is digital literacy and the adult learner. Hopefully you can see my screen, and so let's jump right in. The first thing I wanted to show you was learner agency and the definition of it. Learner agency is so important for our adult learners. And I love this definition presented by OCED. And it talks about agency is about acting rather than being acted upon, shaping rather than being shaped, and making responsible decisions and choices rather than accepting those determined by others. We're talking about a topic of digital literacy that is everywhere, and the hope is that we're able to create learner agency in our adult learners and in ourselves, especially with technology, which can be a little intimidating. So these are our objectives today. We're going to define digital literacy. We are going to analyze a framework that was created for adult learners. We're also going to apply the content. So it's not just listening and learning, but let's see if we can apply it as well. So before we jump into defining digital literacy, I'm curious, how many of you have seen this document? So if you are comfortable with the Zoom platform, you're able to raise your hands. So if you could raise your hands and tell me if you've seen this before, that would be great. All right, I see a hand raised. Okay. Okay. So some of you have seen it, and because your hand is not raised, it's either you're not sure how to, or you may not have seen this document before. It is called the Maryland Adult Education Technology Standards. It was printed in 2004, and it provided some guidance on technology for the state of Maryland. And it's been a guideline, but now in 2019, soon to be 2020, unbelievable. Some of the terms in this document are not relevant to our adult learners. For example, VHS. It does list VHS in here, and there are a couple other things in here. And so the hope was to create something that was relevant for now and also for the future, because technologies are also emerging. There are some things that will exist that we haven't seen currently that will exist in the future. So this was kind of the starting point of the digital literacy framework that we're going to talk about today. So let's go to what is digital literacy? So before I give you the definition, in the chat box, can you tell me a couple words of what you think digital literacy is? Just type it in the chat box, and I can see the chat box, so I'll see what you comment on. Ability to use computer devices. Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. Anyone else? Also remember to change it to all panelists and attendees. Okay, the ability to use technology, using technology for learning, using technology purposefully and with scrutiny. That scrutiny word is an important word. Okay, so keep typing in the chat box if you'd like. Use technology to accomplish a goal. Okay, and I'll keep checking into the chat box. So let me show you the definition of digital literacy. The official definition. The term digital literacy skills means the skills associated with using technology, and some of you have already mentioned this, to enable learners to find, evaluate, organize, create, and communicate information. This is taken from the International Museum and Library Services Act, and WIOA references this as their definition for digital literacy. So this is the official definition of digital literacy that we're using right now. And we're also going to jump into the why. So we've already mentioned what is digital literacy with a definition, and we'll get into more details in a moment. But now we're going to look at the why. And again, I mentioned we're going to be a little engaged in this session. So I have Poll Everywhere. For those of you who have used Poll Everywhere, or if you haven't, it shouldn't be too challenging. Let's see how it works today. At the top of the screen, you will see a website. And Ellen has also posted this link in the chat box. Or you can text Jamie Harris 229 to this number, and you will be able to respond. We'll do a few Poll Everywheres as we go. So hopefully you can see this Poll Everywhere screen. Ellen, can you confirm with me if you can see the Poll Everywhere on your screen, or if you see the PowerPoint?
So I see the poll.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So here we see ability, technology, successfully working today's world. Okay. Sometimes these are hard to read. Critical. Wow, information means that a lot of people have put information in. It's usually bigger with the more people that send in that response. Organize, thrive, generations, navigate, essential, empowering, disinformation. That's an interesting word to use. If we could chat on this webinar, we would be chatting about that. Working, current. Wow, access. Thank you so much for putting in all of these comments. This is why it is important to you. Some really good words there. Survive. Wow, that's a good word too. All right. So now I'm going to exit this full screen and jump back into this presentation here. We're going to continue with Poll Everywhere in the future. But here you'll see a little bit of research of why digital literacy. Not only is it needed for seeking, applying for, and getting a job. I mean, if someone goes to Target and they want to apply for a job, they have to go into a kiosk and navigate that to get a job. But it's also to take advantage of growing educational, civic, and healthcare advances. So when I go to the doctor's office, in order to check in, I have to use a touch screen and read the information and understand how to navigate the screen. Most of you probably use a portal of some sort to find out what your medical tests were, what your doctors are saying. So healthcare advances, that's one big reason why digital literacy. Also, we are hoping to have employable graduates. If they're going into the workplace, digital literacy is important. If they're going into college, it's still very, very important. So these are just two of many, many statements of why digital literacy is important. So we talked about the what. What is digital literacy? It goes beyond just technical. It includes cognitive, it includes communication, it includes evaluation. And we've also talked a little bit about the why. So let's take a look at this framework, all right? This framework was developed in Maryland by your colleagues. Some of you in the room probably were part of this work group, but we know that digital literacy is important. And so we wanted to provide something that could help outline and clarify what digital literacy means. So it's called the Maryland Adult Education Digital Literacy Framework for Adult Learners. And if I could do a drum roll for you, I would, because it's really exciting that this is in its final stages of development. We started in March of this year. The work group started meeting in June, and now we're in the final stages of this initial document for digital literacy. So, who's the audience? The audience of the framework are adult learners. It's not just for our students. Our students, yes, they need digital literacy, but it's also for instructors, it's also for administrators, and it's for staff. We are all lifelong learners. And so while I'm very comfortable with technology, I'm always learning, and I always have to improve in certain areas. And so wanted to make sure you knew that this is not just for the student. Some of you in this room are instructors, and it can be a little intimidating trying to teach students digital literacy when you yourself have to work on some things. I do myself. And so this is hopefully a guide for you as well. So what is the purpose of the framework? If you're familiar with the Employability Skills Framework, if you're familiar with WIOA, if you are familiar with the English Language Proficiency Standards, if you're familiar with CCRS, College and Career Readiness Standards, they all mention technology. They emphasize technology over and over again. Jesse, thanks for the drum roll, by the way. They all mention technology, but how do we even approach it? So the framework was designed to be a common understanding, all right? It's made to provide definition and structure. It also offers a reference of evaluation. So the framework, when you have it in front of you, should at least help you identify what's already been done and what the gaps are, or what's already great, what can we work on. It also emphasizes transferability of skills. So this is huge. An example of this. 4 years we have been working on Microsoft Word. And before Word, I think it was like Works, if you remember that. And then there was like Doc. So there have been some evolutions of word processors. The ability to go from Microsoft Word to Google Docs can be a challenge. They're both word processors, but they're different in some ways. And so it can often happen where we see something new and we think, oh man, how do I even start? And I would imagine for our students and for some of you, there are those moments. For example, this copy machine that we have in the office, there are days, it's a brand new copy machine. There are days I don't even want to try. but I have to understand that if I have some skills with the old copy machine, the new one has some similarities, and how do I transfer skills from one to the next? The fourth bullet point that you see here is to reset mindsets. Sometimes with digital literacy, we focus on the technical exclusively. And while the technical, which you'll understand what I mean in a moment, while the turning on of a computer is important and needs to be taught, that is not it. So if we tell our students, create an email address, that's nice and great, but if we don't equip them with things they need to know when they create an email address, it can be a challenge. So they may get an email saying, oh, please send me $50,000 because I need help. They need to understand that they created an email address, but not everything that comes to their email is to be that they need to respond to it or things of that nature. And the last bullet point here is to encourage integration into a current context. This framework is not just another thing to do. This framework exists to support what is already being done. It is to be integrated into the current context. So an example that I have is I love teaching literacy level ESOL, English for speakers of other languages. When I am teaching them the alphabet, I can integrate a skill and tell them that the @ symbol, which Spanish speakers call arroba, actually in English means at. So as they learn to say their email address, instead of saying jamieharris@gmail, jamieharris@gmail.com. And that's a very simple example, but integrating it into the current context. So let's move a little bit to the structure of the framework. There are 7 interconnected elements in this framework. We have a definition, we have guiding questions, a description, and situational examples. On each of these 7 interconnected elements, you will see all of these areas. This framework is general, and so the hope is in the future we can get a little bit more detail on how to implement it, but this is a starting point to provide guidance on each element. So here is the framework. Again, drum roll. These are the 7 elements of digital literacy. This comes from extensive research. We have consulted multiple sources and looked at other things that exist and made it fit within the adult education world. So we have technical, civic, communicative, collaborative, computational thinking, investigative, and productive. Those are the elements. So before we jump into me providing the definitions for you, I'm going to challenge you to figure out the definition yourself. So again, we're going to jump into Poll Everywhere. And I'm going to go to the next slide here. Give me one moment to set it up for you. Full screen. So please jump onto pollev.com/JamieHarris229 again and define the technical element. What do you think of these definitions, A, B, C, or D? Define the technical element. It's anonymous, so I will not see your name if you get it wrong. So feel free to jump in and choose the correct definition that you think it is. Okay, I'll give you a couple more minutes. Well, no, just one more minute. Okay, so 82, oh, it's changing a little. Oh, some people put C in the chat box. Okay, great. Thanks for participating. So let's see, can I stop? I won't stop it. Okay, so at this point, at 11:19 a.m., 75% of you believe that the technical element is C, and then the others who are in the chat box. We do have someone who believes it's creating solutions and someone who believes it's A. And I will tell you that the correct answer is C. So nicely done. All right, let's go to the next one. I'm going to ask you to define the civic element. And I think if you, I'm going to clear the responses for a second because I think someone was responding to the previous. All right, now define the civic element. Okay. Right now we're at 100% for B. And if you're having any challenges with the poll everywhere, you can still put it in the chat box. Okay, still at 100%. Okay, a little different. Okay, I see Amelia, you put B, thank you. All right, so at this point, we have some who think it's C and A, but most believe it is B. And I'm going to give you the answer in a moment. We're going to do the last definition challenge here. So pause your responses for a moment, please. Okay, now, can you please define computational thinking? Okay, so it looks like 70% of you and a few more in the chat box believe that it is A. All right, some of you believe it's B, and I think I saw a C in the chat box. All right, so great. Let me exit out of this and jump right back into the slides. And I'm going to show you the actual definition from the framework. So technical is the physical navigation and operation of digital tool structures and conventions. And what I have in front of me is the framework. And so I'm going to read a couple things from that. The technical element in digital literacy consists of foundational physical skills which are necessary for the acquisition of digital literacy. They include powering on and off devices, accessing tools and applications on devices, mouse or touchpad functionality, troubleshooting, internet searching, internet browser navigation, username and password basics, and the list goes on. What you see on the screen are some situational examples. Using a touch screen to sign in at the doctor's office, I've already talked about that. Academia, knowing how to click links in a blog. So you're reading a blog and they have a word that's highlighted as a link, and understanding that if you click on that word, you will get the definition or you'll get more information. Employment, typing in time of entry and exit on a timesheet. So before I jump to the next one, I'm curious, for those of you participating in the chat box, can you think of any other situational examples for technical? Go ahead and type in any other examples that come to mind for you for a situational example with technical. Make sure you're responding to all panelists and attendees. Fill out an online job application. Taking the GED Ready practice test. Know what software you must have on your computer. Okay. Being able to know that that's Word and click on it. Okay. Great. Troubleshooting. Why is my mouse not working? Oh, I need to turn it on, especially if it's wireless. All right, so we have a couple more examples in the chat box. Thank you so much. Now we're going to take a look at CIVIC. And CIVIC is a lot like, traditional citizenship, where individual participants have rights and responsibilities that need to be respected. So this is the definition of the CIVIC element: using digital tools safely, effectively, and appropriately. We can all join into the digital world, but there are rules, and there are ways of knowing the rules, either by trial and error or maybe explicit instruction. So let me read a little bit of the CIVIC. The civic element in digital literacy is akin to the idea of traditional citizenship. Several aspects include online safety, building identity, managing reputation, etiquette, and participation. And there are a few more details or definitions for each of those areas. If you look at the screen, you can see there are situational examples again. Create different passwords for different accounts for safety and security. Provide references to avoid plagiarism for a copied graph. I'm sure instructors, you have heard, oh, it's on the internet, I can just use it, right? Not that simple. And the employment example: secure and protect personal identifiable information. Can you think of any other situational examples? So I'm going to do this for each of the elements because I'm hoping you're thinking through this as you see them. So for the CIVIC, what are ways for safety, efficiency, and appropriate use? Avoiding risky websites and links. Virus protection. Okay, give it another moment if you have something in the chat box. And while you're thinking, I did want to show you just a page from the If in Doubt, Leave It Out. I like that. Okay. Safety for children in the house. Yes. So what you see on my screen, hopefully, is a page from the framework. And this is how it looks. As I mentioned, it has the element, the definition, guiding questions, a description, and situational examples. So this is just a page, and this is what I am reading from as I give you more details. All right. Thanks for participating in the chat. All right, let's move on to communicative. I will say we have communicative and we have collaborative. And as we were researching, the two were very interconnected. But someone can communicate and not collaborate. And that's why they're two separate elements. The reverse is not true. In order to collaborate, you must communicate. But that's why we have two different elements in this area, although they are very, very, very connected. So communicative is sharing ideas clearly, effectively, and creatively with different audiences following digital communication protocols. Don't use all caps in an email because it means you're yelling, that kind of thing. So here are some situational examples for life, academia, and employment. Composing a professional email, for example, capital I, not a small case I, YOU, not a small u, things like that. So this is the communicative element. I'm going to show you the collaborative, and then we'll think of other situational examples in a moment. So this is collaborative, and it's self-explanatory by the name of the element. Connecting and working with others, using appropriate digital platforms and tools to identify, design, share, analyze, and create digital content. Here are examples for life, academia, and employment are: 1, scheduling appointments on an online website. I sometimes schedule my oil changes online. I reserve tables all the time online. This class is collaborative. I hope so. I saw that in the chat box. Okay, academia, working together to complete a document on learning management systems. Employment, using a webcam to foster community during a virtual meeting. These are all examples, situational examples. And so in the chat box, I see netiquette. Yes. Netiquette for emails and online discussion groups. What are the rules for communication and etiquette in an online setting? And that term is netiquette. Let me see. I think I have the word netiquette on communicative. It's as if you've read the framework. We have the word netiquette right there. Tone and timeliness. When someone at work emails you today, should you wait a month to respond? What's the appropriate timeliness? Very good. All right, so communicative. Let me read from the framework a little bit. The communicative element in digital literacy enables the individual to access and share a variety of digital resources and materials with others using various platforms. So this is not only on a computer, this is mobile, this is on an iPad, it's on different devices. So we also have to remember to expand beyond just the computer, especially as research shows a lot of people don't have computers. They use their smartphones as their primary means of communication in the digital world. All right. So communicative, we have netiquette, the rules guiding appropriate communication in a digital environment. We also have here selection of appropriate platforms and the presentation of information that's customized for the intended audience. If we look at collaborative, it mentions teamwork, problem solving, expanding horizons, and being engaged. All right. Can you, in the chat box again, I hope this is helpful to you, but can you type a couple more situational examples of communicative and collaborative? I see, Nadine, you've put effective collaborative communication in webinars. I agree with that. I've been in some webinars and I haven't been engaged at all, and it could be a little boring. And so that's why, for example, I'm trying to get you guys engaged so that it's collaborative, so that we're sharing and working together. Using Blackboard in a class. Thank you, Pamela. For communicative, producing educational files for learners, audio and video. Okay. We see execute electronic permissions. Ooh, for mortgage documents, yes. Receive and execute encrypted content. Skype conference meeting, Google Docs share, great examples. Very nice. Okay. So let's jump into the last 3 of the elements from the framework. We have computational thinking. And the thing I want to say is computational thinking is not just math. Computational thinking is critical thinking skills. You probably heard of DOK, depth of knowledge, and it gets into higher order thinking skills. That is what computational thinking is, right? We just don't hold the hand of the learner forever. We need to equip them to think critically and make decisions. And this goes back to the learner agency piece I mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation. Critical thinking skills and problem solving skills in conjunction with technology to gather data, analyze information, and find a solution. Here we have some situational examples: personal budget on a spreadsheet, analyzing a poem for tone, rhythm, and structure, and then we have a scheduling and agenda for a planning meeting. All of these things take critical thinking, and using technology to foster that is fantastic. In fact, on the framework, you will see At the bottom, it says problem solving plus the power of technology is equal to computational thinking. The next element we see here is investigative. Searching, identifying, and validating reliable and authentic digital resources. This is probably one of the biggest challenges. How do we know if this is real? You see some situational examples here. Valid research. Being able to sort through the real and the unreal. And that's the investigative. And the last element we see here is creating content, solutions, and products through the use of digital tools. So all of these elements hopefully should support the productive. When they are creating something, all of these different elements should contribute to that. It happens in life again, academia, and employment. So those are the elements. Before I jump to the next part, the last part of our objectives today, are there any questions? Creating a brochure is an example of the productive, yes. Okay, so I wanted to give a moment for questions. I don't see anything in the chat box, so I'm going to jump to the application of this. So again, let me remind you of the definition of digital literacy. It's more than just the technical. It also includes finding, evaluating, organizing, creating, and communicating information. So I want to show you because this framework was presented a couple times, and in the presentations, we've done gallery walks, and each group had an element with a definition and provided for us what they thought, the examples. And as you see on the screen, we see here for CIVIC, this is one of the many, real life, knowing the difference between HTTP or HTTPS. Understanding that there are spam emails, they have netiquette, lowercase versus all caps, a detailed subject, responding to the right subject line. Here, and we see in academia, using diverse sources, not abusing personal information, taking advantage of digital educational tools. And last here we see employment, keeping work email work related. And often I think sometimes we assume that people just know these things, and that is not always the case. Employment, secure access outside of work, printing work-related things only. The next thing we're going to look at is investigative. And here you see at the very top, they have news versus fake news. In the chat box, I see maintaining personal events log with alarms. And we have a question. Is researching family history investigative? I would think that researching family history is investigative, as well as critical thinking is involved in that. If there's any interaction, maybe it's communicative, it's quite a few, and technical is involved. So Karen, yes, I think you're on the right track. Okay, so as we look at investigative here on the screen, we see news versus fake news. Academic differentiating between reliable and unreliable sources. Life. If you look at the third bubble down, it says, studies sponsored by a pharmaceutical company versus sponsored by doctors. Understanding what is an ad and what is from a doctor. Sometimes they look so similar. How do we differentiate? Here is collaborative, coordinating childcare, and then what they did is they put a digitally enhanced version of this activity. Task management apps, online checklists, and here we have CIVIC, managing reputation. One activity is looking at a real life example of someone who has suffered because of their negative online presence. You've probably seen this in the news. There have been some athletes that have been affected by this, and so using real life examples to demonstrate some of these elements can be very effective. So let's jump into Poll Everywhere, and we are almost done. Let's see, we have a couple Poll Everywhere, and it's applying it to your context. So let me full screen this. Give it a moment. Sorry, I should have just started with the right one, but that's okay. You get to see and review your responses before. All right, so here, same Poll Everywhere page. Which element of digital literacy have you improved recently, and how did you do it? This is for you as a participant in this webinar. Have you improved any of, if you think of all of these elements, have you improved any of them recently, and how did you do it? You can put that in the chat box or on Poll Everywhere. Okay, so someone said collaborative, and can you tell me how you did it? How did you improve your collaborative? Yes, your collaborative ability. Cybersecurity training. Okay. Oh, that's great. I'm glad that we could help with some of the elements in this webinar. Collaborative and communication. Okay, give you another moment to think about your own application. Collaborative by engaging in a new social media outlet. A learning management system. The SIS acronym I'm not familiar with. If you could put, clarify what SIS is in the chat box, that would be great. Finding ways to help students get on board with future transitions to work online tools. Okay, so online tools for a textbook. And before you have students do it, you did it yourself. I think that's what you mean there. Okay. All right, here we have in the chat box, technical, started using Google features and was taught by an instructor. Collaborative through discussion board threads, logging in and out. Student information system, thank you. So you'll notice there's a lot of communication and a lot of collaboration here. Very good. Looking at job position availability status and expected entry level ad on government website. Some investigation there, right? Track changes, yes. Okay. Here is our last Poll Everywhere question, I think. Have you given your students the opportunity to improve their digital literacy? And if you have, which element were you addressing? Snag it. So as you type that, I'm going to continue reading from the chat box. Utilizing 2 new learning management systems and learning the program Snagit to use for educational lectures. Taking quality management peer review class. I think that's quality management. Enhance peer interactions in class using software to streamline work edits. Works cited, I'm sorry. Creating resumes to upload to Monster and Indeed. Okay, so taking something that's physically on paper and putting it into Word. All right, technical, communicative, and collaborative. How to use smartphones to look at weather and around the world and practice weather-related language. YouTube, yes. Translation apps, problem solving, and critical thinking. So you'll notice you are already implementing areas of this framework. So when you see this framework, it is what am I already doing? Because I am already doing some of this. Where are the gaps, and how do I fill in those gaps? Okay, smartphones for quizzes, Aztec software in parallel with pre-GED, Burlington English, communicative. Encouraging students to evaluate validity and reliability of online accessible research. All right. Okay, this is actually the last question. So we just talked about what you're already doing. We are already addressing some part of digital literacy. So are there any gaps that you may not be addressing? And do you have any ideas of how to fill in those gaps? So think of all of the elements. And again, I'll tell you what they are. Technical, civic, communicative, collaborative, computational thinking, investigative, and productive. Are there areas that are gaps? We all have gaps. As you hear the framework, what area do you think you can focus more on? While this is not an element, it's a good point. And self-reflection, I really value that. So I need to trust the value of technology use more than I do. Access to technology outside of class, the technical, how and when it makes sense to try to use one's phone rather than a laptop or desktop. And is the convenience worth dealing with compatibility and privacy issues? So I'm seeing a couple comments here about connectivity. So that's a real issue. We can't avoid that real issue. The framework was created ideally to function in an environment where technology is everywhere. Is that always the case, that technology is everywhere? No. But I hope you've noticed that some of these elements can be taught without the device in front of them. For example, the civic. Some of the very important information of that can be taught, and they don't have the device in front of them. Ideally, you want to get them to a point where they can apply it, because of course learning is most effective in context. But if you're having connectivity issues, there is a way to address some of these elements in your educational setting. Because we teach adults, I'm reading from Poll Everywhere, because we teach adults, we may assume that they don't need instruction in civic, but they often do. Civic, helping students understand safety. And there are a lot of resources. So I'm gonna go back to the slide so that we can finish up here. But just so you understand, one of the next steps is an implementation guide. So we see this framework, so how do we implement it? Especially for instructors. That's something we will be working on, so look out for that, because there are so many resources. You should not have to start from scratch because a lot exists. So look out for the implementation guide soon. Again, I wanted to show you what the framework looks like. I want to thank you so much for being a part of this session today with me. I think we have maybe a couple minutes, Ellen, is that right, for any additional questions?
We do. We have a couple of minutes if we have questions.
Okay. You're very welcome. Thank you for being here, and you'll see there's my email. I am not IT. I will say that. My specialization is technology integration. So if you want to email me about how to set up an app or something, that's not something I do. But I am available to help you understand this framework and to just share what our next steps are. Can we get the updated guide emailed to us? It's a great question. The final guide we're hoping to put on a website. On the website where you registered, you'll see a tab at the very top that says the resources. You can go there to get the recordings, and also, Ellen just posted it, and also the framework, hopefully. All right.
Yes, so the website that you went to register for these sessions, by the end of the month, will include all of the recordings and all the resources from all of the presenters. So that will happen, just give us a little bit of time. I also put a feedback survey link in the chat box. I'm going to post it again because it's seeming to get lost with all of the thank yous to Jamie. So we would love your feedback if you can provide that for us. It's a very, very short survey. If you can just take about a minute to complete that, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much, Jamie, for introducing the new digital literacy framework to the group. I hope everyone took something valuable from this. I guarantee you it will not be the last time you see it. So thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you all for being with us.
Have a great holiday, everyone.